Welcome to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast, where we inspire women by teaching applicable skills and tools and assisting them with connecting with one another, healing, and aspiring to their highest selves so they can reach their full potential. Hi, thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about embracing your authentic self. We're also going to be talking a little bit about healing from codependency and a little bit about Heart and Soul Wellness, what we do and what we're about. So Heart and Soul Wellness was established about 3 years ago, right before the pandemic. And I am a trauma therapist. I specialize in helping children and women heal from trauma. So I specialize in sexual assault, treating sexual assault, eating disorders, betrayal trauma, physical or emotional abuse, childhood trauma, and complex trauma. It's actually what I love to do. I love my job. Don't see myself doing anything else. And part of that journey has been me learning more about the brain, about all of these different tools that we have available to us, to helping us to aspire to our highest selves. And it's been incredible for me to see the change process. It's an honor to be involved in people's change process because it is absolutely incredible. I have seen people rise from things that just really shook them mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, in every aspect of those words. But to see people arise is why I do what I do. I'm very passionate about the work that I do. I can definitely tell you that my heart is really in this journey that I go on with my clients and helping them to, and it's really not me doing the work, it's my clients who are doing the work, but just being on this process and walking with my clients through their journey. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I opened Heart and Soul Wellness and what my vision was. So around the time I was like 14, 15 years old, I always had this vision of having a safe place for children to come. But over time, as I started to work with kids, I started to realize if I'm going to help kids, I got to help their parents. We've got to look at this whole dynamic. And so I started to engage more with learning more about how to treat adults. And then I really engaged in addiction work. I also engaged even more in trauma, as we know that addiction is often very rooted in childhood trauma and complex trauma. And so I wanted to just learn as much as I could about the whole process and how to help people to heal. And so I continued my work with children. So when I graduated high school, I ended up going to the University of Utah and got a psychology degree. And then after that, I got my master's in social work. And once I got my master's in social work, I started working with foster kids. So I started doing that, going down that path. And doing traditional cognitive behavioral therapy was pretty much what we were trained in at that time. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which we know helps people with changing their thought patterns. But what I realized as I started doing cognitive behavioral therapy is you can't really change your thought patterns if there's significant trauma. If there is these negative core beliefs that have been established, there's got to be some other ways and tools and skills to help people with breaking free of that. So I started working with adults and I started doing a lot of addiction work. And then from the time I graduated for 15 years, I was really engaged in women's issues. I wanted to be able to help be an advocate for women, and I wanted to be able to help them with breaking past childhood trauma, abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, all of these issues that we know that women face, body image issues, all of that. So that's really what drove me, was learning more about how women could really step into who they wanted to be, owning their truth and moving forward with their lives and not getting stuck in a lot of these that all have found ourselves stuck in. But a lot of these cultural, societal issues that we know that women face, body image, eating disorders, sexual assault, domestic violence, are all things that are very common for women to experience. Of course, we know 1 out of 3 women will experience domestic violence, and those are the cases that are reported, and 1 out of 5 will experience sexual assault. These are Utah statistics as well, so it's something that obviously is happening here in Utah. And then I've had about 15 years experience working with survivors, like I mentioned, survivors of addiction, trauma, sexual assault, all of these things. And while I was working at Davis Behavioral Health, I was working at the Women's Recovery Center, started getting trained in yoga therapy. And then at that time I started EMDR. And when I started EMDR, my mind was blown. I was like blown away by the potential and the success that people were having when I started it, especially with complex trauma. We're talking about things that people had in place for a very, very long time, for like young. And that I saw that people were actually able to start to break free of some of the stuff that had been keeping them stuck. And so what we know about EMDR is that when we use EMDR, it's bilateral stimulation, and we use 5 components of memory. So this is how we store our memories. Okay, so it's basically our thoughts, body sensations, what we were sensing, smelling, feeling at the time. So our emotions as well, images. So all of those components of memory, we identify them and we're able to clear them out with EMDR. And so anyways, it's very phenomenal work. EMDR was first started in the 1970s. Francis Shapiro developed it, and it was used to help war vets deal with PTSD when they came back from war. And what they found out is that significant improvement of PTSD symptoms. And the research shows that even when EMDR treatment was stopped, that PTSD symptoms continue to improve, mental health symptoms continue to improve, self-esteem, all of that continue to improve. While I was going through my training, there was this story of a war vet that was very skeptical about EMDR. And he started it. And when he started it, at first he's like, this is not going to help me. There's no way, right? And so he did a couple of sessions. And at the end of it, he was working on self-confidence. And at the end of it, he was like, this is incredible. I'm definitely going to be doing this again. So the thing that I like about EMDR is that it is evidence-based practice, and it's also, so we've got research and science to back it up. And the fact that it's evidence-based is just, we have all the data to show us that in terms of trauma, in terms of PTSD, it's just, for me, the number one effective treatment modality out there. And it's what I specialize in. I use EMDR with the majority of my clients that come in. So that's a little bit about EMDR and why I started learning about it. As a clinician, I felt very frustrated, I think is a good way to describe it, with not feeling like my clients were moving forward when I was using traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive behavioral therapy definitely has its place, and it's something that's interwoven into a lot of treatments, so there's nothing wrong with it. However, EMDR has a way of getting to the root of our issues very, very quickly, very effectively, and in a very short time. So, it's just very, very effective. I've had sexual assault survivors come to see me that have only needed to come for maybe a month. And afterwards they're like, oh, the distress isn't there about this thing anymore. I feel like I can totally move on with my life. Completely different situation from when they started coming in to see me. So it's something that I like the community to know about, because it is just so effective in helping people to heal. And it's been very profound for me as a therapist to see the healing potential for people who are engaging in that process. So it's something I'm very grateful for. It's always an honor for me to be part of someone's journey and part of someone's process. So the second part of what I wanted to share today is, so we're going to talk about embracing the authentic self. But before we do that, I want to share a little bit more about my journey. So right around the time where I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy and working full-time as a clinician, I wanted to learn more about yoga and how it could be used in the healing process, and I wanted to learn more about meditation. So I did a teacher training program at Salt Lake Community College. I got certified in being a yoga teacher, and it was hard for me as a clinician, I think. One, it kind of changed context for me, but the second reason why is I remember during the time I was taking the yoga therapy program, I was just overcoming, working through some grief and loss that I had experienced. And I remember sitting in the class, and my teacher knew that I had a recent loss. And he said to me, he's like, this is an opportunity for you to lean in and sit with your emotions. And I sat with my grief instead of pushing it away for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, instead of numbing or running from it or distracting myself with other people's things, I actually sat with my own stuff. And it was hard and so transformative at the same time. The reason why it was transformative for me is because it gave me the skills and tools to learn how to sit with my emotions. Now, sometimes sitting with our emotions doesn't feel safe. And so there is a lot of trauma-informed mindfulness where it's like it's an invitation. You listen to what your needs are. You listen to, hey, do I need to lean in? Do I need to provide more comfort or safety within this practice? So there is a lot of that happening. But the reason why I like it, and the reason why I think it's transformative for individuals who are healing from trauma and learning to love themselves and learning how to really accept themselves, is it gives you an opportunity to befriend your emotions. Instead of rejecting or denying or running from, you are actually sitting with the emotions that you're experiencing when you're experiencing them. And this can be really, really profound work. So right now I'm in a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher training program. And, it's really interesting to see how this unfolds because, so John Kabat-Zinn, who developed this program, so he talks about mindfulness in 3 ways. And so one is that mindfulness is non-judgmental. Basically, you're noticing moment to moment of what you're experiencing with compassion. And so really what we bring to meditation, a lot of what we see in meditation in terms of our tendencies is what we're going to see, like how we show up in our daily life. And so the reason why I love it is when we start off our day with like an intention or with like a 5-minute, the meditation that we can offer that day and sitting with what's present instead of rejecting, denying, running from, we are giving ourselves the opportunity to be empowered, the opportunity to know ourselves. It's different than running from. And so I know the running from. So I used to be a runner until I injured my knee. But I would run, and that was my thing. I even remember when I was a kid, when something happened that was difficult or hard, my way of coping was running. Not necessarily a bad thing. However, taken out of context or balance or out of balance, it could be maybe not as helpful to me. And so I remember the very first time I took a yoga class, I was lying there in Shavasana, And the teacher, I was just lying there, and the teacher was like, okay, just close your eyes, just focus on your breathing. And that first time lying in Shavasana was like the hardest thing for me, because I was so used to going. And so mindfulness and meditation has created a path for me to learn how to befriend my own emotions, but also this practice that we're in of sitting with the emotions as we're experiencing them without judgment, with compassion, and just sitting with what we notice. It's just very different. And then we're able to bring that into our relationships, and then we're able to bring that into our life. So an invitation that I have for people that come in to see me is just to start with like 5 minutes of intention setting in the morning, like how you want to show up for the day. Do you want to bring in grace to your day? Do you want to bring in unconditional love? Do you want to bring in compassion? And then once you do that, just allowing yourself to sit for 5 minutes with wherever you're at, really practicing this acceptance of wherever I'm at today is where I'm at. And so long story, so I know that we're just kind of going, but so this allowed me the opportunity to learn how to not just sit with my emotions, but then I learned more about yoga, and I learned about how you can heal the body through movement. So it's very powerful work, because all the research shows that when we engage in some healthy movements, and oftentimes when we engage in movements that activate where we're doing left, right, we are integrating our left and right brain. And so this is a way of creating more grounding for us. But so doing that, doing movement is very profound. And yoga is very, very helpful for someone who's healing from trauma or deals with anxiety or depression or any of those things, because it allows the body to release emotions that are stored. But as we know, we do store emotions and trauma in our bodies. So it gives us an outlet or a skill or tool to work through our emotions in just a really healthy way. But yoga is profound because we are practicing meditation, and we're also practicing the breath work while we're moving. And so it teaches us quite a few things. One thing is it does teach you surrender. It's very positive for mental health, because you're learning breathing. So you're learning how to calm down your parasympathetic nervous system. So this creates an imprint in our brain where we can come back to this. We can come back to this regularly. So yoga therapy has been very profound. It's something that we offer here at Heart and Soul Wellness. And then the other thing that has been very helpful for a lot of clients is foot zoning. Foot zoning is new in the mental health community, and I'll explain what it is. So foot zoning, on your foot, there's a signal to your entire body. So on your foot, you can access like your lungs and your heart, and you can also access, your back, all of that. So that everything can be found on your foot. And there, again, like there's research that backs this up. So it's very helpful for a lot of clients when they're doing difficult process work to do also foot zoning, which is a way of basically bringing the body, mind, and spirit back into balance. And so here at Heart and Soul Wellness, we look at mind, your heart, and your spirit. Basically what this means is that we are addressing the whole person. We know that there's spiritual aspects that can be helpful to us, regardless of whether you are part of a religion or affiliated with anything that way. That's okay. We actually love working with people on finding their own spirituality if they feel like, well, like right now I don't have that in my life. That's one of the things I love, is helping people connect with spirituality. And then emotionally, right? Our emotions are a part of us. And then our physical body, those things are all very, very connected. And so those are the things that we address here at Heart and Soul Wellness. And we do those in a very holistic way. So we look at the whole person, and your journey is your journey here with us. And so We honor wherever you are at. For people who really want to engage in EMDR, that's awesome. For people who it's not their thing, or they're maybe not quite ready for it, that's totally fine too. We really start with where our clients are at, and then just allow them to move through this process. We offer it's called Embracing Your Authentic Self support group for women. This is for anyone who's experienced betrayal trauma, complex trauma, relationship trauma. And essentially it teaches women how to step into owning their stories and step into who they want to be. So we look at codependency symptoms. We also look at shame and triggers and how to manage those. I teach a lot of skills and tools to help with coping with post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And then at the end of group, all the women create a vision of where they want to be, and then they set goals to work on those things daily. And so, yeah, it's a pretty awesome group. I've been very impressed by the women who have shown up to that group, and it's awesome to see how women can be strengthened when they come together for a common cause and common reason. And then, so the other thing that we were going to talk about today is healing from codependency. So the authentic self is our highest self. It is who we are at our core. And it takes time to really understand and figure out what this is, I think, especially if you've been through a lot of trauma, complex trauma, or have just kind of had a pattern of unhealthy dynamics in your family situation. So, or family system. And so what we do is when we're looking at your authentic self, a lot of times people like to go back to, okay, like, what did I like when I was a kid? And like, what were some of those things, when they're really trying to figure out what their desires, what their wants are, what their needs are. And so, because we can find ourselves sometimes stuck either in a relationship where we give ourselves up, or we give ourselves up in other ways. So this is just a way for people to really sit back and say, okay, like, what's important to me? What are my desires? What are the things that I would like to see move forward in my life? Or what are some of the things that I need in my life? So what we do is, oftentimes with my clients, is we'll look at like, when you take everything else away, all of the labels, all of the expectations, perfectionism, all of this stuff, like, what's left? Who are you? Still acknowledging that some of these things are important for our identity, absolutely. But then also looking at, who am I underneath that? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What are some things that are interesting to me? What are some things I've given up? And what are some things I want to do to work on more of a whole self, more on a development that feels authentic and that feels like something that I can step into. One of the ways that we do this is owning our story. So by owning our story, we are accepting past, accepting where we have been, looking at ourselves in terms of a survivor versus a victim. And being a survivor gives us more choices, gives us the ability to see ourselves in a whole light, even if we're working on our healing, right? But seeing ourselves as whole instead of broken, without choices, right, gives us more choices. And then looking at what do I want to incorporate right now in my life? If I look at myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, where am I at? Like, what am I needing more of? Am I needing more? And we know, like, our sexuality is tied into our sense of self, right? So do I need more creativity in my life? Or emotionally, do I need more compassion with myself? Do I find myself getting stuck in negative patterns? So maybe it's compassion. Then when we look at ourselves spiritually, maybe that looks like I need more walking outside, connecting with nature, understanding myself differently in a different way. Or maybe that looks like connecting with a higher power, connecting with something greater than myself, even if that is going outside, going into the mountains and and seeing something beautiful. And then physically, right? Like, how do I feel in my physical body? When we notice that all of those are low, it's a big sign to us that it's time to engage in some healthy self-care. It's time to look at where are my strengths right now, and let's capitalize on those strengths. That's what helps us move forward. So acknowledging what's working well for me, and then maybe what's my one step moving forward. Maybe it's the gym. Maybe it's more social connection with other women. Maybe it's positive affirmations in the morning, positive intentions that help me set the tone of my day. These are these different things that we can engage in that create a whole self. So when we look at the authentic self, it isn't what everybody else wants us to be. It's who we know that we want to be internally. So when we talk about like your integrity or how you're showing up, it's really about how you're showing up for yourself. And how we show up for ourselves oftentimes, and this is the hard part, right? Looking at this, is that seeing like, I notice that I struggle with this area of self-care, and I'm actually noticing it shows up in my relationships too. So it gives us some information when we take some time to pause with what are my strengths, and what do I want to do more of in my life so I can create more wholeness for myself and in my relationships. Whatever work you do internally is going to have a huge effect on the people around you. We always say when moms heal, kids heal. It's just the natural progression of things. If you are doing your work and you're engaged in a positive healing process for yourself, children heal, but not just children. We notice this is how communities heal. This is how women are able to be empowered and impact the people around them. And we know that women are very strong when they're united. I spent some time in Africa several years ago, and one of the things that I learned there was the strength of women. When there was ever a problem in the community, these women would just band together, and they would create some amazing things in their community. And they valued each other, and the community valued them. And it was beautiful to see. It was absolutely incredible for me to see and for me to witness. And so when you think about what you need more of in your life, what things can support you, oftentimes we go to this very critical place when we feel like we're not meeting our own expectations. And oftentimes when there's a deficiency in something, it often means that we need more support in another area of our life. So looking at like, how can I bring more support? How can I bring more care and nurturing to myself so that I can create more wholeness in my life? And then as you're doing this, noticing what are some of the things that I'm taking in that maybe are harmful or not as helpful to me? It could be relationships. It could be some things that messages, right? Body image messages from society, things that bring you down instead of lift you. So this week, what I encourage you to do is think about what are the things that are bringing you more joy in your life? What are the things that are helping you to look at yourself as a whole self? Physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, what are the things that are helping you to feel like even when there is something hard or difficult, that you're still able to come back to yourself? That's the biggest thing, is that things will happen, but can we come back to ourselves? And if there's still more healing to do, that is okay. That is okay. Wherever you are at today is okay. So my invitation to you this week is to practice non-judgmental, compassionate awareness. Being aware of yourself, noticing how you can bring compassion into your daily life, and how you can also give that to others. And then the other part of this is I encourage you to write down, take some time to journal about yourself, where you're at today, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and sexually. And then again, people always ask me, like, what does sexually mean? It's tapping into your identity, tapping into your creativity, tapping into these things. Of course, this can also be needs that are met in a relationship or in other ways, but this is looking at who you are as a person and how you want to thrive and how you want to move forward. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, tying this all together, and then writing all these things. And then each day you can write down in each area, like what your goal is for the day in that area. And that can be awesome. So it was great to have you today. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for listening to the Heart and Soul Wellness Podcast with your host, Sarah Carter. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any thoughts about what we talked about today, leave a comment. Also, you can find us at heartandsoulwellness.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Join us again as we continue to help women heal, connect, and aspire to their true and authentic selves.